all of those assumptions I think are done for political reasons. It's a way to say, watch out for them. They're black Republicans. They're trying to, take something away from the community. When in fact, what we're trying to do is actually bring an option to the community, an alternative. And that for African Americans to vote 90% Democrat is reckless. It is absolutely reckless. I became a Republican probably around 2002. I probably leaned more right of center than most of my friends. Most of my friends were either Democrats or liberals. And I guess they saw the world in a different light than I guess as a child growing up did. I always had a suspicion of government's intrusion, I think, in people's lives.
I think I discovered that I had conservative beliefs my sophomore year of college. I was blessed to have an opportunity to work for the at the time, the United States Speaker of the House, J. Dennis Hastert. And it was at that time that I recognized my conservative values and just the way that I think.
You could probably argue that I was organically conservative, but due to the fact that it was a little bit of a stigma to be black and conservative or Republican, I just registered as a Democrat by default. That having been said, I was becoming increasingly disenchanted with what I felt was the leftward drift of the Democratic Party.
I've always been a Republican. My parents always enforced self-improvement, self-empowerment, and it just came naturally. So it wasn't, I guess I'm not like typical black Republicans where they discover their political influence and tendencies later on.
I'm from the Bronx. I've lived in New York City my entire life, born and raised in the projects, actually. So it's odd that I ended up being a conservative Republican.
My mother, I think when we first started, my mom was just a staunch Democrat. I remember growing up as like 4 years old, my mom having the picture of Richard Nixon, as a dartboard. She'd throw dartboards at it. But I think through her sort of renewal of her spiritual commitment, I believe she chose to become more of a Republican, more of a conservative. So in that respect, she is. However, it's interesting that all of her daughters, that we've all sort of are very different in our own, how we've arrived at our own political spectrums too.
It's really interesting. I think the biggest misconception about black Republicans is that we are Republican because we think that somehow, well, first we have decided we hate our community.
That we're Uncle Toms, that we are out of touch.
That we are trying to be white, that we don't care about our communities.
Out of touch, Uncle Tom's, wealthy.
We are somehow not really connected to this black experience, and so it makes it easier for us to be Republican.
And that we don't understand what it's like to live in the shoes of an everyday African-American struggling man.
The other idea is that, we join the Republican Party because there's an issue of self-hate. Hate for us being born black, as if it's a strike. The people I've talked to, we're very proud about our heritage. We're very proud about, where we've come in our family, but we make it a conscious decision based on what we truly believe in and not because it's the most comfortable or the most popular.
Looking in the mirror for the first time and saying I am a Republican, that was hard for me because I knew what the people around me expected. Living in such a liberal city, New York City is a bubble. We're really disconnected from the rest of the country in terms of the way we think. I knew people would expect me to be a liberal Democrat. They would expect me to vote for a person with a D behind their name, regardless of whether I knew what it meant or not. So saying I am a Republican was really poignant, and I was a little bit scared by it at first. Now I'm comfortable with it. I've had a lot of time to get comfortable with it. It's not easy to be a Bush defender. If you can defend Bush, I think you can defend almost anything.
There's a research think tank called the Joint Center for Economic Studies that does a lot of research on African Americans, and it finds that on most issues, actually African Americans, especially younger African Americans, actually agree with the Republican Party. That is, if you took away the party label and just told a person, do you agree with this, do you agree with this, African Americans, for the most part, are overwhelmingly Republican in their beliefs. The problem, as the Joint Center mentions in its latest, I think, research paper, is that the Republican Party is seen as a white Southern party. And running around talking about states' rights is not necessarily the best way to effectively communicate and do outreach to the African American community.
One thing that the Republican Party, I think, has failed to do is to not expose themselves within urban America. I'm part of a new initiative called the Urban Conservative Movement. And what we do is we take Republican issues and take them to African American communities. I think that's the issue. I don't think that it's an issue of Republicans, blacks not being Republican just because. I think it's because the Republican Party and the GOP, historically and within the last 40 to 50 years, has not shown up to black America and has not showed up to, going further, urban America.
Republicans traditionally have this outlook of, we don't want to look at people by the color of their skin. Therefore, we're going to treat everyone the same. But we have a history in this country that we have to acknowledge, that we have different communities, different cultures, different ways to relate to people. And with having this outlook, which I understand and even agree, you have to look at people as people. However, we do have cultural differences, and with that, there's a lost translation of how should we talk to the African American community. And I'll admit, just like anyone else, that there needs to be a change in the way that Republicans communicate to African Americans and just urban communities in general that reflects the diversity of the country.
I don't think necessarily the problem with them is substance. I do believe that it's one of tone. And I think the tone is often sort of harsh and hectoring and insensitive. And in a way, I think the Republicans have to strike the right balance. It doesn't mean sort of rolling over or kowtowing to anybody, but tone matters. Tone is very important. And if people feel like you're shouting at them, they get turned off.
In 2008, it was a very difficult decision, but I voted for McCain in the end. I felt that McCain best represented my views about the world, and that he best represented my views on foreign policy. I have a strong view of foreign policy, and I thought that McCain would be the best person to represent that.
I supported John McCain, and I say that because John McCain, not only is he a true American hero, John McCain has had the gonads to stand up against his own party. And I think that says a lot about a person. And let's remember, in 2000, the GOP was not in full support of John McCain. And then all of a sudden, 8 years later, he's our front runner. So I think that says a lot about his character. Not taking anything away from now President Obama. I'm happy that the country moved forward in electing our first African-American president.
Well, I voted for John McCain without question. Although I do like Barack Obama, he's a very likable person, but there's a difference between voting for someone you would like to sit down and have coffee with and voting for someone that you believe can point the country in the right direction.
I had literally been waiting at least 8 years to cast my vote for John McCain. So when he got it, there was no contest, even with the historical contest that was taking place on the Democratic side.
I really, really wanted to vote either for Fred Thompson or Mike Huckabee. Those were the men I really wanted to vote for. And I didn't get excited about John McCain until he gave us Sarah Palin. And I'd been following Sarah Palin for a while beforehand. I was one of the people online in, these small groups saying, Sarah Palin, she's the person he should pick. He should really, really go with Sarah Palin.
I don't think I've ever agonized as much and as long as I did during this most recent election. And I told folks, you know, because folks are like, you won't vote for Obama? Come on, of all the people. And I'm like, listen, if this was about race, I'd vote for him in a heartbeat. You know, if this was about progression and change, I'd vote for him in a heartbeat. However, his method of going, I couldn't. And it hurt me so much to be able to do it, to not be able to vote for him. It was, you know, I went to, here in New Brunswick, we had a big gala and for the inauguration, and it really was tough. I mean, it's emotional for me now to understand how important it is. And I want him to succeed. I want him to do the best bang-up job he can. But at the same time, it doesn't mean I'm not going to let up on what I believe is the best for our country and what's the best for my community. And I think that is the best way to honor what he has accomplished, not to just sit back and think that, oh, we got a black person in the White House, isn't that cool? It's like, no, he got there because he's got some skills and some ideas that he really believes in. Let's really respect and honor him by challenging them.
When I try to tell people why I'm Republican and why I believe in certain things that may not be the norm, I think you have to put it in the way that people can understand it. And I think that's what differs with the GOP, is that they have not been successful at doing that. When you talk to someone about keeping their check, keeping the federal government out of their business, and having a system that gives them equal opportunity, then I think people tend to understand what it means to really be not just a black Republican, but a Republican. And I think that's how that has to be the message moving forward with urban America.
Well, a common reaction is, why are you a Republican? You know, and I'll ask, well, why do you ask that? Like, oh, because you're black. Number one, and let me be perfectly frank, that is racist. That is racist. Just as it is racist to vote for someone because they're black, just like me, it's racist. Because we're judging people based on how they look, saying, this is how they should think, this is what they should do, this is who they should be, this is how they should act.
I am more and more surprised by all people. I don't think that race should have so much to do with who a person votes for. It should be about the issues. And this comes from both blacks and whites and whoever. They're really surprised that I am Republican, that I voted for John McCain. Why can't people just vote for who they identify with on policies, and that's it?
I think it's reflective of the hostility and the idea that when you're black or you're Latino, everybody has to vote together, and then everybody is somehow obligated to support the candidates that every other person in Black America supports. I feel no such compunction. I have walked with that bag throughout the campaign. I had that John McCain for President button very prominently displayed on my bag, and I carry it with me pretty much everywhere I go. I've been stopped a couple of times by people saying, hey, what's up with that? And I say, it's pretty self-explanatory. Nothing else is need to be said. And I don't feel an obligation to justify what I believe to anybody else because they happen to think that it doesn't fit with what they think I should be thinking or think of how I should be voting.
And frankly, like I said, I don't think most black Republicans are necessarily out there to be liked. If we want to be liked, you get a dog. If you want to be respected, you fight for the things that you believe within the circles of influence that you have. Again, when people say, why are you Republican? I answer their question, but I find that they're usually not very satisfied no matter what the answer is.
I happen to be in a master's program called the National Urban Fellows, and the education portion happens in New York City at Baruch College. And the professors obviously were all very liberal. We're bashing Reagan, bashing Nixon, bashing George Bush, and I'm just sitting there not saying anything. My leg is like shaking, whatnot. And at some point, I guess it hit some of the professor like, oh, I hope there aren't any Republicans in there. And I'm telling you, my hand shot up like a rocket. And there was like this dead quiet silence. And it was okay, you know, I'm just like, whatever. And for the rest of the class, I mean, just the semester, every opportunity they could to take pot shots, they take pot shots. I'm like, whatever, it doesn't matter. But the funny thing is that people would like get me in a corner and tell me, I'm registered Democrat, but sometimes I'll vote on an issue and I'll vote conservative, or my husband's a conservative. So it became like a confessional at some point that folks felt like, I can tell you. It's like, it's all right. Say it. You shouldn't be embarrassed about it at all.